So my special guest for Kuumba is a native North Carolinian, Paul L. Anderson II. He's a graduate, a teaching assistant at the University of Missouri School of Music, where his responsibilities include program support and assisting in prepping choirs for performance. He also conducts Pitt Street Harmony, an auditioned chamber vocal ensemble specializing in traditional vocal jazz repertoire. In addition, the group performs contemporary popular music and a cappella arrangements. Paul also serves as the founding director of the Deep River Singers, a choral ensemble that promotes the performance, education, and preservation of Negro spirituals. Previously, he served as the music director of the Eta Beta chapter of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia in Pembroke, North Carolina, the Fine Arts Chair and the choral director at Spring Lake Middle School in Spring Lake, North Carolina, and the conductor of the Carolina Symphonians Chorus. In 2021, he was presented the Ander J. Dunham Educator of the Year Award by the Spring Lake Kiwanis Club. Paul holds a degree in music education with a dual emphasis in choral and instrumental studies from the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. He's also a member of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, and the American Choral Directors Association. He's also a member of the Executive Board North Carolina chapter of the American Choral Directors Association. Here's the thing that he forgot to mention in his bio. He is also my friend, and I consider him my baby brother. He's all grown up, but whatever. Welcome, welcome, welcome to night 6, where we are celebrating Kuumba creativity, and I cannot think of many people who exemplify this more than you. So welcome and welcome.
Thank you so much, Chanda, for having me on. As a fellow practitioner of Kwanzaa, as a fellow celebrator, an observer of Kwanzaa, it's always a joy to be able to share in the festivities and to share in the observance. I do have to say that sadly, and it always pains my heart when my time runs out on things, I'm no longer a member of the executive board for the North Carolina American Choral Directors Association, but I'm an avid supporter. So I thoroughly enjoyed my time on the board. All of our amazing leadership there, from the grassroots level all the way up to our state board, are doing amazing things for the state of North Carolina. So I forgot to update my bio on that. So that is my bad. So please don't be too mad at me, Dr. Rivera and Jose. Please don't be too, well, Dr. Rivera is Jose Rivera, but Dr. Rivera and Jeremy. So thank you all. Thank you.
Well, I know they are sad to not have you on that board, because I know how hard you work and I know how dedicated you are. And even from, like you said, from outside that position, you're continuing to work and to serve in that capacity. So I'm going to give you credit for it. You get the gold star anyway.
Thank you. I'll take all the gold stars I can get. Hopefully I can give them to somebody else too.
Hey, you see why he's my friend? I'm just... So I'm absolutely surrounded by creative people, by practitioners of the arts, people who do it avocationally and professionally. And this is a question that sort of throws people into a tailspin when we really dive down deep into it. So I want to start by finding out from you, what is your personal definition of creativity?
My personal definition of creativity, that's a very great question. So I'll sum it up like this. I don't think creativity is simply limited to one specific art form. I don't think that it's limited specifically to the arts. I think creativity can manifest itself in a number of different ways, whether it be in business, or whether it be in public policy and administration, whether it be in the arts, in music, in athletics, whatever the area is. I think creativity is coming up with ingenious ways to accomplish something that may not have been thought of before. I also think that creativity is taking a new perspective to something that otherwise would have just been standard fare.
That's a gorgeous explanation. I really like when people are expansive about creativity, because believe it or not, I do know creatives who are like, nope, 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 it is paint on a canvas. Nope, 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 it is a ballerina on point. And so to hear creatives including others in what their definition is tremendous, because we know that the Kwanzaa definition of creativity is also expansive. It's not just singing and dancing and painting, it's making the world a more beautiful place. And that happens in so many different ways.
Yes, and I think of a quote by the great poet laureate and creative himself, Langston Hughes, speaking specifically about artists, but I think it applies to creativity, which is perhaps our role as artists isn't to just show the beauty that we see, but to help others find the beauty within themselves. I'm paraphrasing, of course. I could never say it as eloquently as he has, but that always comes to mind for me when I think of creativity, especially working with youth, working with students in middle school and high school, secondary education, and now working in post-secondary education as I work on my graduate studies. There's so many different ways that creativity manifests itself in our everyday lives and not just in special occasions and platforms and performances.
That's absolutely true. And you've talked a little bit about your journey so far, but talk to me about how early creativity was introduced to you, and what its impact has been, um, starting from a young person and moving forward.
Absolutely. I think one of my earliest memories was being a TV kid, sitting in front of the television, watching cartoons nonstop. I was that child. I was that kid. My parents and close family members will tell you I was all into whatever is on TV, whatever the cartoons were, because I had a fascination with the idea that anything can come up on that screen because the only limit is our imagination. I can draw it and it'll be there. It can be a 10-foot tall monster, or it can be a 5'7" human being telling a joke on a screen. We have something as outrageous and outlandish as the Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry defying physics, to a little bit of slice of life, and maybe from, well, Simpsons isn't really too much slice of life anymore at this point. But anything is possible there. I say that that's probably one of my earliest memories there. I had a strong affinity for music. I grew up in a musical household. My mother is a singer. My father is
Oh,
a
yes,
preacher with a long appreciation and long track record of loving of music. So there was always music happening in the car. There was always music happening at church. And occasionally I would find a song that I liked and come up with new words to it. As a career musician, which is a blessing to be able to say that, that's really where it all started for me, was in the household and in the home, and having teachers, having my village that were really happy to support me in exploring that. I always wanted to be a visual artist, but my drawing prowess was not there. But nobody ever told me to put down a pencil or put down a paintbrush. And even now, finding other ways to express myself, beyond just music. From my time as an elementary school student, singing in the chorus there in visual arts, to getting into middle school and participating in theater, and into high school, being heavily involved with the marching band and theatrical arts, and becoming a manager for my school's step team, which was a venture that I'd always kind of felt in my heart, but didn't really have an opportunity to do that. So I kind of moseyed my way in by saying I was supporting my younger brother, who was an actual member of the team. But I'd say really my village really encouraged me to figure out how to be creative, and how to be very disciplined with myself and all the other parts of my life, so I could figure out what are the ways that I want to maybe move differently, and that it was okay for me to explore those things instead of shunning me. When you're a kid playing basketball outside and you say you want to try to shoot the basketball on one leg, from all the way in the back of the driveway, they don't tell you no. They don't tell you, nope, go ahead and line up like you're on the free throw line, like you're trying to improve from 73 to 83%. No, they let me do it. And I'm eternally grateful for that.
It makes such a difference when you do have a village, and when that village is so supportive that you lose yourself, like you lose the limitations because they've not put them there for you. You don't discover limitations until people introduce them to you. And so I thank you for being part of my village and part of my daughter's village, because Miss Carly loves her some some cousin Paul, and she has that little spark of musicality. She has that spark of performance quality. And when we came to a rehearsal recently, she ran right up to you and you put her right up to the piano. And I was like, this is right. This is a good thing. So let's turn our attention and talk a little bit about that. Can you tell me who the Deep River Singers are?
Absolutely. People ask me this question so often. And I use because there's so many thoughts. I try not to use it as a crutch. All of my public speaking experience and instruction, I can hear all of my mentors telling me stop saying. So instead of saying I will pause to really get into the depth of what the Deep River Singers are. The long and short of it is we're a vocal ensemble, particularly specializing in the music known as spirituals or Negro spirituals, African American spirituals. Where I like to call us semi-professional because so many of our members, music is their main vocation, as well as some of them it's their part-time job, but they have a certain level of professional experience going on. These singers have been hand selected at first, and we recently just held our first round of auditions in December of 2023. And we really want to hone in on choral music excellence, particularly with the spiritual, especially as it's growing in terms of Western fine art, Western classically arranged spirituals, and really making people more aware of the options that are out there and the beauty of this music. Because too often it seems as though this music is thought of as, let's not think about slavery, let's leave it in the background. Or as a choral music professional myself, I need to find something to really end out my program with a bang. Let me just throw a super fun spiritual in here at the very end. And the tides are turning and things are changing within the field where that's happening less and less now, because people are very, very invested in learning about the history of each and every piece that they program, whether it be Brahms, Beethoven, Berlioz, or Burley, or Bonds in this case. So we really want to hone in on choral music excellence, but also an educational component in what we do at each of our performances that we perform. Typically, if we're hosting the program, we try to incorporate a moment of education throughout it, explaining the lyrics of these songs, explaining the text of these songs, where it may come from, whether it be from a lived experience, scriptural Christianity reference that the slaves were using and interpolating into their own lives, or if there were some messages to these other songs that were hidden to help them escape to the Underground Railroad. And then the audience actually has a moment during the program where they're taught part of a song, part of a piece, or something completely new, and they're encouraged to sing and take part with us. This music has been historically passed around orally, oral tradition, without being written down with lyrics, without being written down in notated music, as we like to call it now, with quarter notes and eighth notes. And the beaming goes here, and this is a dotted eighth note, this is a dotted half note, this is a dotted eighth rest. So really our mission is to spread the history of the spiritual, promote the development of the spiritual form, the art form in and of itself, whether that be solo arrangement, whether that be choral arrangement, or whether that be an impromptu arrangement and singing of it. That's our main goal as a choral ensemble. With you, and I'm biased because you have so much graced us with your artistry as one of our artists with the group. With all of our artists, many of them are soloists in their own right, so they have solo performances throughout our programs too. And we really try to incorporate this in a sort of authentic family kind of way. And we hope that those who come to our performances feel that same sort of energy. And we hope that if you ever see us, you'll mingle with us and ask questions. And every single one of our artists, I like to call them artists rather than singers or members because they are artists. Each of them has a vested interest in what we do, whether they relate to it from a deep historical and personal experience, or they relate to it because they have discovered this music, whether it was familiar to them or not, and they truly resonate with what I call the first original form of American music, way before we got to jazz, way before we got to rock and roll, way before we got to R&B and country and bluegrass and pop. We had we have these spirituals.
I love the way that you just light up when you're talking about this group. I know that as an artist with the group, I feel that sense of family so deeply. Again, I wouldn't bring my daughter around folks that I didn't trust and love like my own family. And for her to be enfolded and to call y'all cousin and auntie and uncle and not only that, but she's getting some musical training just by being around us. I catch her running around the house sometimes, or she'll be sitting and coloring, and I'll hear something that we've been singing or something that I've been rehearsing. And that just lights me up. I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's talk more about something that you touched on just a moment ago. The fact that the lyrics to these songs are not just pulled out of scripture and repeated for no good reason. The fact that these lived experiences and the ways that they are expressed lyrically are so touching and moving. It speaks directly to the creativity that is ingrained in our ancestors, that was ingrained in people who were living a struggle that we cannot even imagine. For them to be able to pull beauty and to create this music. Can we talk a little bit more about the creativity shown by Black people in struggle and how that continues to be a theme for us?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked this question, because this I actually have the book sitting right over there on the piano. This is really an area of research and discussion that I think is worth everybody exploring. If you call yourself a musician within the United States, within one of our great American institutions of higher education, and you study music, it's very important for you to learn and be acquainted with this first music that's influenced so many others to come after it. If we start all the way back in 1619, when a Dutch man of war settled on the shores of Virginia and the first enslaved Africans were brought to this country, and once we get past all of the feelings and all the stuff that come along with discussing slavery, this, as you mentioned before, this incomprehensible experience, to have your humanity stripped away from you and to be told and to be exemplified that you are less than, that you are somehow not human, and to somehow survive that as a people, you have to have creativity. And that creativity manifested itself in so many different kinds of ways, whether it be from cultural traditions from Africa that were modified, whether it be cultural traditions that were brand new, whether it be deviations from culture, whether it be let's make the most out of what we have. Or, as to quote one of my favorite social media chefs, let's make something out of nothing, because food was a part of this as well. When we start
Absolutely.
talking about the spiritual, you have this combination in this combining, same thing there, of multiple different kinds of musical traditions. You have this idea of Western hymnody being brought from, at that time, the churches in England and in France, and what we may know in uh, different denominations of churches being brought over, as well as music from the African continent, whether it be rhythms, in some cases possibly instruments as well. One of the thoughts that some people have is they brought nothing with them, and this is oftentimes true. But when you had instances of they needed to keep the slaves' bodies active while they were on these ships in the transatlantic slave trade, there may have been instruments there to have them continue to dance. So you have a few of those instrumental influences there, but not as much there. So when we talk about the text of the spirituals, a lot of them are based in Christianity, because that was what was being taught to them. When you're brought to a strange and foreign land and everyone around you has a different language, depending on what specific tribe you're from in your geographic area. It's not always I'm from a different country, but different tribes had different languages and different dialects as well. And then you all merge together. That's how we talk about the diaspora being spread apart, and you have to link onto something there for you. And you have this idea of chosen family. You kind of go with what's the main thing we have in common. And the gospel of Christianity, the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you will, was being preached to the slaves. They would hear this maybe not day in and day out, but possibly weekly. And they would often sometimes use this faith and this religion almost weaponized to keep them in subjugation and in servitude. But they still found a light, and they still found a faith in it. So many of these songs were spirituals, almost all of them that I would classify as spirituals, all religious in nature. Whether it be talking about Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air, speaking about Ezekiel in the Bible, all right, or whether we're speaking about we are climbing Jacob's ladder, Jacob in the Bible in the Old Testament. Okay, and some of these verses would then jump between Old Testament and New Testament. Sinner, do you love my Jesus? Sinner, do you love my Jesus? It's speaking all about these biblical stories, not myths to them, but very real for them. But they also use them as a way to hold on to something. So they would take what they knew, which was this experience, and they would take what they heard, which was this faith, and they would find something, they would create something for themselves uniquely to them, and they would hold tight to that. And it would manifest itself within the songs and the singing that they did. And they would often use these songs as message songs to communicate with one another, so as though their overseers and masters would not be able to become wise to whatever they were planning. If I was by chance a slave and we all start singing, "Swing low, sweet chariot," I'm at the front of the line as I'm going down with my hoe, going down with my rake, tending to the crops, and all the others behind me saying, "Coming for to carry me home, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home." It may not just be a song, and the overseers and the masters saying, "Oh, well, that's such a nice song. They're dreaming about heaven. We're all going to go to heaven someday," and whatever other thoughts that they had. But they may be talking about someone from the Underground Railroad is coming here this evening, is
Mhm.
coming here. Someone is going to be carried home, home meaning freedom, whether it be to a free state, whether it be further north. All right. And there may be other descriptors in the song, such as, "I looked over Jordan, and what did I see?" I looked over Jordan, possibly referring to the Jordan River or an actual river. So those are just a few of those ways that creativity manifests itself within the spiritual specifically. There are other kinds of Black folk music that were created during this time, and really influenced as we move between the 17, the 18, the 1900s with our different chain gangs, all right, and
Yeah.
these work songs that happen as well. But the Deep River Singers focus right now, at least, particularly on spirituals, because every slave knew at some point he wanted to be free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, which is also a spiritual. It's not directly from Martin Luther King Jr., but he even said that in his speech.
You know, there are so many little references. I there was a funny moment where I was at Tennessee State University, and I was maybe a sophomore, maybe not a freshman, and we were sitting in this class, and the lady was droning on and on and on and on. And one thing that you know about historically Black colleges and universities is that we like to start when class is supposed to start. If we walk in the room and the professor's not there right at 8 on the button, we start the clock and we're like, all right, she got 10 minutes. And we want to be let go right at the end of class, whether that's 9:40 or whatever the timeline is. She got about 4.5 minutes past her end time. And from the back of the room, I heard, "Let my people go." And the next person in front instinctively tagged them, "Go down." And we were singing it quiet, but she got the point. She knew, okay, all right, let's wrap it up because I've lost them at this point. Class is over. And it's one of those things that I've always been acquainted with Negro spirituals because my mother sang with the alumni singers of St. Petersburg, who hopefully a few of them are watching today. Hey, y'all. But they were very similar in concept and in form to the Deep River Singers. They were founded by Bobby Anders in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they had a very similar mission. He wanted to ensure that these spirituals way back in the 80s did not get lost, that an entire generation would not be removed from this important cultural touch point. And so he gathered up some of his old high school buddies and folks who had sung this choral music And by that point, they were up in age and retirees, and this was a fun new thing for them to get together and do. But they were brilliant musicians. They were excellent singers, and they were my village growing up. They were my aunties and uncles, and I remember I can distinctively hear their individual voices and the choral sound that they produced. But moreover, I remember the music itself, and I remember Bobby teaching about what was being sung, so that you weren't just pulling words and notes off a page. Um, and I think that it's so important because there are some good lessons to be found. There is certainly some uplift and some encouragement to be found in those songs. So just off the top of your head, what are two or three that every American, regardless of who they are and where they come from, every American should have as a cultural touch point from what you consider to be Negro spirituals?
I'm going to go with one that I think most people do know,
Mm-hmm.
which is When the Saints Go Marching In. Almost everybody is familiar with it in some way, form, or fashion, whether it be Louis Armstrong, whether it be it was in my red book, my book number one on whatever instrument in band class, or whether it's from pop culture. It is a spiritual. Oh, when the saints go marching in. And there's so many different iterations of these tunes, but I would definitely say When the Saints Go Marching In is a very, very, very important one. Some really important touch points there. I do believe that Swing Low, Sweet Chariot is one of my favorites. I think that there's so much there that we can really, really unpack. And then the namesake of the group, Deep River, I think is
Yeah.
one of the most profound and deeply moving and really a spiritual experience of a Negro spiritual. Um, I'm just trying to find the words to really put my feelings into words here.
Because I
Um,
have tools right now. Deep River. I I grew up singing, but I didn't realize that like know your voice is a thing. Um, I didn't realize that I could actually sing until I was a junior in high school, and it was simply because like my family sings. I sing at church. Everybody sings, but it took somebody from the outside to hear my voice and to stop me and say no, let me help you train this instrument. And one of the things that Mr. William Renfro, who hopefully also is watching tonight, put in front of me was Deep River. And that was a pivotal moment in my life as a young woman. I was coming to grips with my Blackness. I was coming to grips with who I was going to be. There was so much happening in my life at that moment. And for Deep River to drop in and to be the piece that he asked me to train and learn and connect with, it was life changing. And to this day, I can't hear it. I can't sing it without just going to a place.
and I think the melodies of these songs have a way of resonating with us for years and years to come. I think as a culture, as a monolith, I'm very careful about using that word,
Mhm.
and using as a culture overall. I think that with Black music, we often think of the soloist. We often think of the harmonies that are happening, and all these things meld together. And sometimes we try to separate the melody from the words, which is very important in terms of accessibility and in terms of digesting exactly what's going on. But
Yeah.
some of these melodies are so true and so pure, even though they may change as they're transmitted through the years, they just stick with you, and that's their foundation.
That is so true and so good. I and I wonder if there are people walking around who are humming these things in the back of their mind and they have no idea what the connection is or where they come from. But I wonder if there are pieces of music from this particular genre that are so ingrained in the American lexicon and way of being that they just simply are there and people don't give it a second thought.
I I would say yes. I would
Okay.
say yes. There are so many examples that we can try to find and say, well, this might be it and this is it there. But I think that they are really ingrained within our popular culture and within our American culture. Particularly, I think of one of my favorite childhood movies and one of the greatest movies of all time. I Am Biased. I Am Biased. Again, I told you I was a cartoon kid growing up, but there's a moment in that great film known as The Lion King,
Okay.
where I think it's Zazu was singing. Nobody knows. And that's the spiritual. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen.
Uh,
Nobody knows my sorrow. Maybe one iteration of these lyrics, another maybe nobody knows, but Jesus is
mhm.
quite likely what the slaves would have been singing. And I think just that small phrase alone, maybe not in 2023, but at least in 1990 and 2000 and 2010, this phrase, this melody was there. It was there and it was in popular culture. I do think that there are a number of these melodies that stick with us. As a slight digression, this isn't directly related to the Deep River Singers, but to talk about how the spiritual kind of carries on, particularly within Black culture and a global Black kind of consciousness, with our fraternities and sororities that are historically Black and founded at historically Black colleges and universities, or our organizations that have chapters seated at historically Black colleges and universities. So many of these songs that are passed down and taught through membership and through the different chapters, they use lyrics, they use the melody from so many of these spirituals. I grew up a good Baptist, a good missionary Baptist. And we remember hearing all these, take me to the wall. But I think of wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. And I can't help but think about my own beloved organization known as the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated that has interpolated this particular song
Mhm.
into I got a feeling.
Yeah.
I got a feeling, brother. I got a feeling somebody's trying to sneak in my fret. And although they're not exactly the same melody, that same sort of sense and spirit is there within it. And so many other examples of this. I did a little bit of scholarly work that included this kind of thing there, so I won't go into that much of a
Well,
digression.
why
But
won't
you're
you? Why
correct.
won't you?
Because there's so many things that we could really touch on here. I'm always happy to talk about it. If there are any bros out there, let me know. I wrote a whole paper on it. Let's talk. Come rap with me. I don't run from the groove. Never do. And
Ah, and
so
that's the thing. Like, it's not unique to Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. As a woman of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I can tell you that they sneak in there. I hear them. I know what they are. I can tell you that, having been to a number of alpha probates with my husband, who's a good alpha man, that this is true throughout, right? And I think the experience that we share as Black people, again, comes back to the root and the stem of the diaspora. We all come from the same place, we come from the motherland. And there are certain things that continue to be part of us, part of our existence, and part of the way that we work. And to your comment about us not being a monolith, I completely agree. There are variances, there are flavors, there are levels to this thing. But ultimately, I think that there is something to be said of people who can get there and lock in arm and understand each other without much effort.
yes, yes, completely and utterly so. Now, henceforth, and amen. Or in the words of a great professor of mine, now until whenever. That's the new version of it. Now until whenever. That's the new version, and that particular professor probably knows what the old version is. Appreciate you, Doc. Now, henceforth, and forevermore.
Now until whenever. So we've talked a great deal about the work that you are doing in terms of preserving and performing spiritual music. Tell me a little bit more about some of your other professional adventures. I know that you mentioned earlier that it's a privilege to be able to say that you are a professional musician, and you have quite a storied rise to greatness. So I want to hear some of the wonderful things that have been in your professional path as a creative.
Absolutely. I don't toot my own horn very often, but the older I get, the more I am encouraged by my friends, by my colleagues, by my family, by my mentors, by my professors, you included as well, to make sure that I don't shy away from talking about some of the amazing opportunities that I've had, and I really look at it as an amazing opportunity to meet and coexist and mingle and work with so many amazing people. One of my greatest joys about being a musician, about being a conductor, about being a teacher is being able to meet people and interact with them and hear their stories and figure out not only how are we similar, but how are we different? And because we're different, how can I learn from you? I had a really great experience in my undergraduate career that I worked for almost 4 years in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at my alma mater, the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Go Braves, Talons out. Shout out to all those amazing people down there in what some may call the swamp, but I call home. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. I had an amazing experience, an amazing 5 years. You read in my bio earlier, I have a double emphasis in vocal and instrumental music. And against all odds, I was able to complete the degree. Thankfully, none of those odds were put in front of me as obstacles by professors. They were all incredibly supportive, sometimes even pushing me over the finish line. I don't want to risk only naming a few names and forgetting so many others. So I'll just say thank you to all of them. I have so many amazing mentors through the years. I had a very unique experience and opportunity being a double major there at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke at UNCP, where I was able to participate in almost every single ensemble that we had in our Department of Music. I was heavily involved on campus. I served one term as the president of the National Panhellenic Council there at UNCP, and I was chair of the Step Show Committee, the Homecoming Step Show Committee for 2 years. And that experience and learning how to really navigate and administrate not just a group of people, but an entire event, how to market, how to reach out to folks. I've learned so many amazing lessons there. I had the opportunity to really learn as a conductor and conduct the concert band on more than one occasion. And even at one point, having at least one song with Pembroke Singers, which is a great honor because they don't give up that spot very often when you're in front of an ensemble that large and you as the conductor are responsible for it. After graduating, as you mentioned, I was teaching in the public schools of Cumberland County Schools. I taught in Spring Lake, North Carolina, where I taught choir and general music for 3 years. And during that last year, I did a little bit of orchestra teaching there. I can't say I ever want to do orchestra teaching again, but I've done a little bit of it. I've done a little bit of it.
That's not the first time I've heard that from a friend who teaches orchestra. So there's a special place.
It's a very special skill set, and that's exactly why, with the support of the Department of Music at UNCP, I was so excited to have a double emphasis on my degree. I don't think my life would have turned out the way it has without having that amazing opportunity to study both clarinet and voice. I had an amazing clarinet teacher, Dr. Kevin Strike. Thank you, Dr. Strike, for any and everything. And he knows exactly what I'm talking about, and studying voice with Dr. Jaeyoon Kim. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. Thank you, Dr. Strike. I learned so much as a musician there and so much crossover, and to really be fortunate to have that opportunity to see how are these areas very similar to it, and then being able to apply that as a music director for my chapter of Phi Mu Alpha, the Eta Beta chapter, the Hospitable Brothers. Shout out to them, the oldest Greek organization currently at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, over 50 years. Just had to put that out there. Shameless plug, shameless plug, shameless plug. So incredibly thankful for those opportunities. in terms of other creative ventures, but so incredibly thankful um, to have had that opportunity as well to serve as a conductor for my peers, and that really just made the biggest difference for me, moving into a career of conducting and feeling comfortable enough to audition and stick my neck out there to now be at the University of Missouri, where I'm currently working on my master's degree. So incredibly, incredibly thankful for all of those opportunities.
I'm so glad that you have had the depth of education that you have. I think that it's critically important to have good training, and I think that that is something that many creatives from the Black community miss out on. I love church choirs. I love church choral directors and ministers of music. Um, I love those who direct dance in church choirs. I love all those people because again, it's a very special skill set, and it takes a very concerted effort to coordinate people on that level. And also to coordinate what the church needs and what the move of the spirit is and all of those things. But very often you are not getting a deep and a rich education from those entities unless you have somebody who is absolutely spectacular, and those people do exist. I know several of them. But unless you are really working with somebody who is equipped to handle that, the training portion of it gets lost in the sauce somewhere. So can you talk a little bit about the level of training that it requires to become a professional musician? And also talk about maybe some of the musicians of color and the Black creatives of color that you come across as you were training.
Of course. So I really think back to what you were kind of talking about with our churches, honestly. Some of my earliest memories of musical training happened in conjunction and in tandem with the church, with the Black church specifically. I mentioned previously that my father was a pastor, and he's always had a very vested interest, not just in my musical education, but my education overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about my mother being my church choir director in children's choir. Um, she wasn't necessarily that director for my entire childhood, but for a sizable portion of it, as well as with Miss Sandra Johnson at Baptist Grove Church. Those experiences and singing in fourth and fifth grade chorus at my elementary school at York Elementary in Raleigh, North Carolina. Shout out to the 919, North Raleigh. Very specific. I will claim it all day. I won't try to act like I'm not from there. I am from there, and I love it. I love it. I love every single little bit of it there. But I think those moments of training and those moments of perspective and really having to learn what does it mean to be a musician for me, and how does this compare to the other musicians that I know. I remember walking into band class in sixth grade. Me and my best friend both decided we were going to play clarinet. He because he chose it, and me because I was told I should start there before I went to saxophone. Plot twist, I went to sax and then came right back. Um, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it. I came out on the other side of that knowing exactly where I needed to be. Not
Mm-hmm.
because I was bad at saxophone, but just because I enjoy clarinet so much more. Um, Walking into sixth grade band and realizing that this idea of being able to read music and music literacy and notes on the page, and seeing just that difference in approach between what we call church music, and the ways in which we approach that. We're not sitting there with octavos typically. At least in my upbringing and tradition, we're not typically sitting there with an octavo in children's choir. We're sitting there with an octavo in our mass choir going, okay, I know that we're on measure 5, and I am preparing for my entrance at measure 26. We're learning the parts there in rehearsal, and we're singing them on Sunday, 5, 6 days after that, if there's a program going on. Um, as we talk about what sort of preparation that it takes to become a professional musician or to become a career musician, I saw a video recently on YouTube talking about this idea of music notation and what's important. And it really had me thinking. And he had a few points that I think were so poignant, which are learning how to read music is a very important tool for our field and for our craft, but it's not the end all be all. So many of our popular music artists that we listen to, regardless of genre, regardless of their faith, regardless of their socioeconomic status growing up, and regardless of their race, so many of them do not read music. And they are just as skilled and just as valid and just as talented as our concert trained pianists. They're just as valid and just as talented as our Suzuki level 5, 6, 7 musicians, our Orff Kodai trained and specialized choral directors of children's choirs, regardless of their city, are just as valid as those who are doing amazing work in our churches. I think it really comes down to your level of willingness to hone your craft. I think about professional athletes and how if you really want to go to the next level, it's not enough to only think about the sport when you show up to practice, when you show up to lifts. It's just simply not enough. I can't say that I want to be a quarterback and never look at my playbook outside of practice. As someone who didn't play football, I at least know that. I, as a musician, cannot say, oh, I will never look at my music except for rehearsal if I want to be taken seriously, because it's not even so much as, oh, they're going to know, they're going to find out. No, it's your level of preparation is what sets you apart. The reason why so many of our amazing musicians ask to be paid so much is not because of the 30 minutes that they're performing for you. It's because of the 30 hours of preparation it took to prepare the set. It's because of the 30 years of experience that they've had to accrue to be able to get to this moment. Because when you ask me on a gig, if I'm an instrumentalist, can you play that one song by this one artist? And I don't know it, but you really, really want me to play it. And I really don't want to see you sad because this is a retirement party and you're the retiree and they didn't give me the right set list. I might take the 5 minutes during the dinner break to go back and listen to it and try to figure it out. I think that's what kind of sets us apart, your willingness to put in the time and put in the effort and put in the work. Sometimes it is resources. Sometimes it is the right place at the right time. We can't lie about that. But I do think it comes down to your willingness to put in the work. Talent just gives you a leg up at the start. But that hard work and that commitment is what allows you to stay there once you've gotten into the room. I think talent's a great thing. I think natural aptitude is an amazing thing. And it helps give you a bit of an edge in a competitive sense. But in this business, it's not always as competitive as you'd like it to be. Sometimes it's purely comparative. And if you've got chops, and also if you're a good person to work with.
That part. Because nobody wants to work with a jerk.
I agree.
Nobody wants to work with somebody who's unprepared. Because you've taken the time and put in the effort. And to that, I will, in addition to the preparation, I will add that it is physically taxing to be a creative. Dr. Love spoke earlier in the series about singing, how you need the muscle at the diaphragm to push the air out of the lungs. It has to get all the way to the vocal cords. The vocal cords vibrate at a certain frequency. And, all of this is happening. And he talked about opening your heart. He talked about the muscles the musculature that's involved, the glands there's so much to it. It is flat out taxing. And if your body's not in shape, if your body's not ready for it and your mind's not ready for it, then you're going to get out there and mess it up. You are. You will absolutely mess it up. And I think that to be compensated fairly for the effort, the time, the work that you put in to maintain your instrument, because as a creative, oftentimes you are your instrument. And, just to veer off the path a little bit and talk about visual artists, I know a young lady who is a brilliant muralist. I mean, these things are 40 and 50 and 60 feet high. She's leaning over the side of a cherry picker in work boots and there's a lot that goes into it. It's physically demanding work as well.
I agree. I agree. And as a singer, as a vocalist, like you mentioned, our body is so much that's part of it. Um, and you hear all the time, your body is your temple, and our body also extends to our minds. Sometimes, as an artist, things can become very mentally draining and mentally taxing, and it's a very emotional experience. Being a creative in any sort of field can be very, very taxing because not only are you competing against these thoughts of yourself of, oh, am I good enough, did I take care of this thing, and you're pulling your hair out. You're also thinking about, will I be booked for the next gig, will I be selected for this grant, will I be picked up on the next go round of auditions. And even when we're starting to talk about athletics as well, and we're taking care of our bodies, that's great. But the mental idea of, I'm being in the limelight, the spotlight, all of the time, and there's somebody on the other side of the world telling me how I should be doing my job, telling me how my craft should have been this, but they're not here in my place and in my space. I think
Mhm.
that's when we start talking about well-being and an overall holistic health and a holistic approach to our health, and also our villages too are just as important as a creative.
You are so right. There's a lot to unpack. And I'm grateful that I have somebody on the other end of the line who understands it, because very often you say these things in a room full of accountants, or in in a room with lawyers and engineers and other folks, and they're like, they smile and nod at you, and you can tell they just want to pat you on the head and be patronizing. And it's like, no,
Yep.
my experience is what it is. It is valid. I know I have good sense when it comes to this. So thank you for helping to validate that concern, and to touch on that just a little further before we start to wrap things up. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it's like to be specifically a Black man in a creative space? What is, I'm going to leave it right there and let you have it.
Sure. I think it's quite often that we're told to separate our identity from what we do as a creative, because everything that's creative is valid. All this art is valid and is important. But we can't help but recognize that our identities, here's my DEI hat. Our identities inform so much about how we look at the world and how we interact with the world.
Mhm.
And as a Black man in a creative space, there are so many preconceived notions that come up all of the time. If I were to roll through all the things in my identity, just like anyone else, I could write a whole book.
Yeah.
Um, I could write 5 seasons of a TV show. I just don't happen to be that person
Mhm.
who has the TV show, or who has the book. But I think
Yeah.
for me as a creative, too often I have I've struggled and wrestled with this idea of, am I pigeonholing myself into one particular space because I am a Black man? As a Black man in a creative space, they assume a lot of things about you, regardless of what they know. They look at you and they kind of go, "Oh, you're a Black man. You're a musician. Oh, do you play saxophone? Do you play jazz? Do you do R&B? Do you do gospel?" And while I love jazz and R&B and gospel, I am a conductor. I'm a conductor. There are not, in the gospel field, you have a choir director, but his directing is not the same as the kind of conducting that I'm going to do for for many of the pieces that I'm exposed to every single day. It just will not be. There's some crossover that I really enjoy, and we even talked about this in so many of my different conducting preparatory courses in my graduate studies, that each of us as a conductor will bring something different to the table based upon our experience. And I've had some wonderful conducting teachers that have told me without fail, my goal is not to make you look like me. That is not my goal. And they honor that within my identity. Um, I think really the preconceptions are really difficult for me. Uh, I have a higher voice. I'm a nice kind of guy, and people automatically assume they look. Oh, you're a tenor. Yes, I am a tenor. I am definitely a tenor, without a doubt. I am nobody's baritone. I am nobody's bass. If I do, I'm faking it till I make it. But that's not the only thing that I do. It is not. I am a conductor, and to take it there, some people assume if you are a black man who is a creative, they assume your sexual orientation automatically. They assume what your preference may or may not be just upon the way that you carry yourself, based upon the way that you look.
Mhm.
And if we're being completely honest, while this is part of my identity, whoever I am or I'm not dating has nothing to do with the fact that we are in a rehearsal right now. It has nothing to do with it at this moment. I think that those are some of the hardest things for me, and to find a way into spaces that I otherwise may not be welcomed in, maybe not in an exclusionary role, but because, oh, you want to be here? We didn't know that you wanted to be here as well. Yes, I would love to be here and perform a whole program full of Brahms because Brahms is the best. And I can't help that my culture and my skin complexion that I was born into happen to be what they are, but I still have a deep appreciation for this composer, for whoever they are. And I could get in a whole other side tangent about supporting fellow creators of color and fellow Black men of color, fellow Black men and fellow men of color in creative spaces as well, and the disparities there. But there's so many different intersectionalities. Here are all the different buzzwords to make the algorithm go crazy. So much there, a whole lot to unpack, but I'll briefly touch on that because I know we're getting close to time here.
I appreciate your honesty and your candidness, because as a Black woman, again, my identities align just slightly differently than yours do. And then also when you factor in the art form, if I'm talking about myself as a Black woman vocalist, it's very, very different than talking about myself as a Black woman dancer. That can get flat out ugly. And it's just it's encouraging to me that the world is taking notice of these things, that we are beginning to name these things. But I also am eager for the point where the change flips over, where it happens, and like you said, some of those assumptions are no longer the norm, and those ways of operating, they begin to consider things and people very differently. I'm excited for that to come on to the forefront. I
Yes.
want you to talk about one other thing. I want you to talk about the Deep River Singers and what I consider, maybe you don't consider it to be that, but maybe I consider to be one of our crowning achievements. Last summer, we had a very special opportunity with you as our leader, and I want you to take just a few moments and talk about that.
Sure. And here is here is my unpopular, yet also relatable opinion as a conductor. I believe that, and really as a musician overall, and this is kind of the way I feel about people, period. Most of the people who know me and who truly know me know that it's nothing for me to get on a plane, to get in the car, to get on a train, to go see my people, to go support my people, to be there for a cause. Like, I flew out to a wedding in a completely different part of the country earlier this summer. And when I told my friend whose wedding I was going to that, yes, I'm going to be there, at the time, I only had an invite to half of the events that were going on. And they were surprised on the phone. They said, "Really? You go all that way just for that?" I said, "Yes." "For you?" "Yes, I would." I believe that every single performance experience that we have, every single opportunity that we have, no matter how large, no matter how small, we have an opportunity to make an impact for one person or 1,000 people. And that impact is not measured by the size of the stage, by the size of the hall, by the amount of money that was made, by the amount of money that was lost, by the amount of people in the seats. It is measured by their individual experience. So that's why, and it's probably a bit of the learning how to talk about amazing and great things that happen in and around my life. This past summer, we as Deep River Singers, we journeyed to Carnegie Hall to perform as part of a larger collective, Mid America Productions, underneath the masterful baton of Maestro Jeremy Tucker, one of our mutual friends and colleagues. And that was a truly amazing experience. We didn't have all of our singers there, but we certainly had a few of them there. And I'm hoping that's not my laptop telling me that it's going to die. So I'll give you the long and short of it. Um, but we journeyed to Carnegie Hall. We were there for a few days. We were in rehearsal, and we performed on that stage in those hallowed halls, and it was a great experience. We met so many amazing musicians and singers from in and around our region. So many of us were from North Carolina. It was really, really great. And we could, yes, put on the resume, oh, we went to Carnegie Hall. Yes, Deep River Singers have performed in Carnegie Hall. Okay, yes, we've done it. We've done it. But the experience in the program that we had, two of our singers were singing solos on the Carnegie Hall stage. I will brag about that one. I will brag about them. I'll let them name themselves. I will not name them, but I'll let them name themselves, even though one of them is in my family unit and the other one is beside me on the screen. But I won't name them, not by name. But it was a truly amazing experience to be thought of and to be invited. Um, it's really humbling to know that people think so highly of your art and so highly of your performance that they want to invite you to these sorts of things. And that's really been our story. We didn't realize we were going to begin and start as a group the way that we did. And then people started asking us questions and people started inviting us places because of the art and because of the mission, which we
Yeah.
do. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it is one of my greatest joys to work with such an amazing group of artists, an amazing group of people whom I call friends, every single one of them, and whom I call family, to create this thing and to share this music that meant so much in my culture and to me and to my people. I didn't even talk about my deep history with the spirituals. That's for another time. And just to see how many doors it's opened for all of us has been really great. I just did a session at North Carolina ACDA this past October about programming, about spirituals, and that anybody can do them. Yes, you can do them because they do relate to people in such an amazing and wonderful way.
I think that's an incredible point. We cannot lift up and perpetuate and ensure the longevity of this art form without everyone coming to the table, which is another one of the thoughts that I have about Kwanzaa that I only recently discovered is unpopular with some people. There are some people who are like, nope, Kwanzaa is ours, Black people only. We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna be ourselves. And I'm like, yes, and we need to invite our allies to the table. This is how they are going to get to know us authentically. This is how they are going to begin to understand and relate to our struggle, and our greatness and all of the things that we are. We can't expect for progress to happen with just us. Yes, it's for us, and we will not censor them, but they should be here too. They can come on to the Karamu. They can come on, light some candles with us. We're gonna have some drumming and some singing and a good time. And we're gonna
Yes,
have
as they should. Have them fill up their kinara with candles.
That's it. Ooh,
Have them bring the candles.
come on, bring the candles.
Have them bring the sawadi.
Bring the sawadi. Bring forth. Bring forth.
Have them do it.
Yeah. So while we're here, and this is where we'll finish, just talk to me a little bit about how Kwanzaa shows up in your everyday life. What does it look like for you as a deeply invested, longtime practitioner and celebrant of this amazing holiday?
Well,
Absolutely. So I think for me, being exposed to the holiday at such a young age, to the observance, to the celebration, I can hear I can hear in the back of my head all of the laughter and all of the moments of joy associated with coming together. All the different ways that I experienced Kwanzaa growing up and not always knowing exactly what it meant. And it took me becoming so much older in my life, having such a much wider lived experience to realize that these principles are things that should be exemplified throughout the year. So that way, by the time I get to December 26th and I'm suddenly talking about Umoja, unity. People aren't looking at me going, "How are you going to talk about unity? But you never unified." I think as a musician, as as a choral musician, as a choral conductor, as a conductor, as a lover of people, unity is really a big thing for me. And creativity is riddled throughout my life and all the various things that I do. Because I am a career musician, again, incredibly blessed to be able to say that I'm a career musician, and all the various other ways that I make income and make connections with people, and even the spare time and the free time and the creativity, especially with, oh, I decided I want something new to wear, so let me make it for my own self. I think really, I think about self-determination the past few years. So often we think about, I need to have self-determination in terms of, let me be determined to accomplish something and to get things done on my own. But what Kwanzaa tells us about self-determination is determining for our own selves who we are, and determining for our own selves what we will be, what we will take part in, and what we decide to sow ourselves into. And when I think about faith, as a person of faith, as a man of faith, as a professing and practicing Christian, I think faith takes on so many different meanings for us. And there are so many people who celebrate Kwanzaa that are not people of faith, but they are people of culture, and they are still a people of promise. And that faith is sometimes a faith for a brighter tomorrow. Sometimes it is a faith for a better day.
Yeah.
Whatever that faith is in for you, I always try to encourage that in other people, and hope that the light that was given to me, I was holding the candle, and somebody decided to light my candle with their own flame, that I can then give that to somebody else. And I really do think that it all starts with unity. That's why we always start with the black candle in the middle, that unity, the unity of the people, of our people.
That's
And it
right.
extends to everything else, whether it's the sacrifice that we make every single day to provide for ourselves and for our family and for the generations to follow, or this promise of what is to come. I wake up every day saying that I'm thankful. And I had an amazing mentor and professor tell me one time, because I said I'm thankful, and he said, the more I hear you say that, the less I'm starting to believe it, just because of where I was in the headspace at that time. But I think keeping that mantra of thankfulness has been so crucial and so important for me, especially to quote my own self from however many years ago. I had this amazing opportunity with one of my fraternal organizations to serve on a virtual panel talking about voter mobilization and preparing people for, let's go out to the polls and let's go out there and register, which is, it's not about you as an individual. It's not about you. It's never been solely about you. It's about
Mhm.
all those that come after us. And to quote one of my chapter brothers from the Eta Beta chapter of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia Fraternity of America Incorporated, we used to have a saying throughout the chapter whenever somebody started to become a bit too selfish. And to shout out to the bros, I refuse to live selfishly, which was this particular chapter brother would say, and a lot of them would say it. They'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that it was about you." And it's never about us. It's about us.
Yeah. I love that. I'm sorry, I forgot it was about you. Just a reality check, just a quick check for some people is all they need.
Yep.
Um,
And it's
yeah,
all out of love. It's all
and
out of love.
it is. It is. And love for what I like. I love how Cornell West refers to us as the beloved community. Because sometimes we forget that part. It's like, yeah, we're in the community, and the community can sometimes feel like the 5 or 6 blocks, that circumference that covers the place where you live. And community is about so much more, but the beloved community reminds us that we have to be concerned forward and backwards, up and down,
Yes.
left and right. We've got to be concerned in all areas, in all ways.
Yes.
I
Yes.
am so grateful that you spent so much time with me this evening. I know for a fact that we have probably gone over time, but I don't mind it one bit. This has been so enriching, so helpful. Is there anything that you have as a closing thought, maybe where we can find you and get more information?
Absolutely. The first thing that I will say is thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for sharing your space, for sharing your audience. Thank you to everyone who is currently viewing, who has been viewing and watching. Thank you for sticking around and listening to this random person who you probably don't know babble. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. In regards to the Deep River Singers, feel free to check us out on our social media platforms, particularly on Instagram and Facebook at Deep River Singers. You can also check out our website too. All of those things, it's all the same. It's Deep River Singers, the Deep River Singers. That is who we are. Feel free to check us out on our website and our mission. At this current time, it's still December, December 2023, and we'll be having one more round of auditions. Is planned for January 2024 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. All those details will be on our social media sites as well as on our website. And there are ways to email us that you can find there. Contact at deepriversingers.com, might be .org. .com. Thank you for that. Feel free to send us an email if you're interested in anything that we do. If you're looking for me personally, my name is the same on everything. Feel free to seek me out and find me, but we would really love if you checked out the Deep River Singers and the work that we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your feedback. We would love to get a chance to know you and to get you involved, even if you're not a singer, but you just want to learn more about the mission and more about the spirituals. We are happy to talk with you. We are happy to share any and all that we have, because this knowledge is not something that we're just trying to keep to ourselves. It's something that we're attempting to share. And as you put, Chanda, for our beloved community, whether we know you immediately on the block or you're down the street or you're in another state, we love to engage with you.
All right, friends, there you have it. Let's give thanks one more time for our brother, Paul Anderson II. I'm so grateful for you, and I want to wish you and yours a very, very happy Kwanzaa.
Thank you. Joyous Kwanzaa.